Okay, welcome back. So the switch is just a higher level construct. There's nothing illegal about using it in a wrong way. I'm just saying that typically switches are something that are more a high level, big switch, an on-off switch, not, okay, I want pepperoni and mozzarella. It's a little weird. So how do you do the wiring? Well, the wiring is practically identical. You can still use this technique, except instead of set on check, it's going to be instead of having this guy on check change, it's going to use a thing called a compound button. Okay, instead of radio group dot, because obviously it's not a radio group, it's called a compound button dot. And then it'd be one of those things like, is it checked? And the rest of this is kind of sort of simple. And the deferred method, how would you go about doing that? It'd be the same thing here. It would say, it'd be whatever this thing guy is, and then you say, is it checked? Yes or no? Okay. So if I want to know if the guy's checked, well, in fact, let's do that. Let's go ahead and inflate this guy. So I'll just call mine SW something, because I couldn't come up with a good name. And, oh no, sorry, this is switch. And this is SW something. Okay, let me go ahead and get this guy to happy. And we'll scroll down here and we'll inflate this guy. And so he's SW something is equal to find group R.ID SW something. Cool, all right. Now, if I want to see if something if the switch is on or off, it's pretty kind of simple, right? It'd be something like, if SW something is checked, or that's it, right? That's simple. So if it's checked, I want to spit something out. It says, yeah, man, it's there. Something like that. Cool. All right. Kind of simple. And so let's move on. Checkbox on page 316. So a checkbox is kind of sort of similar in view and look as a radio button, except they're not mutually exclusive. So one more time. What's the difference between a checkbox and a radio button? Radio buttons are mutually exclusive. I must have one selected. I can't have two, can't have none. Checkboxes, I can have them all selected or none of them are selected. So there is no state validation issue with checkboxes. Okay, just saying. And because of that, I don't need a checkbox group or something to make it pull that off. So I can just have plain old checkboxes. Okay, so I'm going to grab me a checkbox, and I'm not going to bother to make it pretty. I'm just going to drag him and drop him right here before the show. I'm going to grab a handful of these guys. Okay, cool. And let's just pretend like we're doing a pizza or something. So this is going to be CB, I don't know, olives. And so the checkbox is going to say olives. And then this one is going to be, I don't know, CB extra cheese. And this is going to be called extra cheese. Okay, so just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to go ahead and run this guy. And so I can have olives and both, right? No big deal. I could have none of them selected. It's not mutually exclusive, right? Okay, cool. If I click this guy on and hit show, it's going to say yeah. Of course, I'm going to ignore that because that's not what we're doing right this very second. Okay, kind of making sense. All right, so there's nothing special about checkboxes. They're pretty cool. Again, how do we find out? Well, it'd be the same thing. It'd be like, is CB extra cheese checked? That's it. So I don't think there's any need for me to do that, right? It's basically this. I just say, hey, man, is the extra cheese thing checked? Yes or no? Kind of simple. Okay. So one more time. Why would I use a switch over a checkbox? Well, because if I have multiple checkboxes, then switches are probably not appropriate. I mean, I could put a switch that says extra cheese. And I could put a switch that said olives, okay? But that's not normally the way they're used because that's a higher level construct. I mean, there's nothing illegal. I'm just saying that big things, big, you know, the way I describe it is a big on-off switch. Chakunk! If it's a big on-off switch kind of idea, well, then you need a switch. If it's, pick some options, well, then no. Okay, cool. Text clock on page 317. That's boring. I'm going to skip that. So there's a whole thing about widget exploration on page 317. Tons and tons and tons of widgets. And quite frankly, you probably do need to spend some time doing that. Now, I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff, and we're going to go to chapter 23 for just a minute, page 656, to pick up a very important widget that we need. And since we're not going to be spending an awful lot of time in chapter 23, I thought this would be the appropriate time to do it. Although this is a long chapter. I'm sorry about that. And so, in other languages, this thing we're getting ready to use is called a combo box. And so let's talk philosophy for a minute. In this world, it's called a spinner. Okay, Java calls it a spinner too, although it's used in a slightly different context. What I'm talking about now is, let's say, for example, I wanted to type in a color. But I don't want you to have to type anything because typing is horrible. And what happens if you misspelled the word? So I want you to pick the color from a list of colors. I don't want to use checkboxes because it would take up too much room. But a spinner starts off kind of small. As soon as you click on it, it expands to how many elements there is. Isn't that pretty cool? Okay. So that's how that works. And so why would you want to use a spinner? Well, because I don't have to worry about input validation because you could not possibly misspell the word red. Although I could probably spell that. But if I said chartreuse is one of my colors, I might not be able to spell that on the first try. So I want to have a list of colors, but I do not want to have to type them. I want to pick them off of a list. And I don't want to do it with a bunch of checkboxes because it takes up too much real estate. Okay? Now, a real world example of this is when I'm using an enumeration. So the pick things off the list kind of a concept. In the Java world, forget about Android for a minute. In the Java world, that would be an enumeration, which means here are the numbers you have, or the choices you have, for what your classification is. You're a freshman or a sophomore or a junior or senior or graduate or whatever. You got 5 choices and that's it. And if you don't remember how to spell sophomore, well, then you might misspell it. So I would use an enumeration in Java. So enumerations and spinners kind of tend to go together in my mind, at least. Okay. So spinners limit the choices to only those things that are valid, which makes input validation trivial because I couldn't possibly pick something that wasn't on the list that was right. And because of state validation, most of the time, you probably want the spinner to start with a starting location. Like if I'm asking for colors, I want a default color to be selected for me. So if I just skipped over it, I still want it to work. So this isn't necessarily a state validation because I don't know what you're doing, but it's possible that you want to select something. So we're going to do it that way all the time. We're always going to select one by default. Okay. And because there's no need for special input validation on these things, this thing comes out pretty doggone cool. All right. So there's 2 typical ways you can do this. There's a way when you try to populate one of these guys. You can use what's called a static string, and then which is what we're going to do. And then you could do something called an array list in code. So maybe, I don't know, like during the running of the application, you have to build this thing so you don't really know what it is at design time. That's a possibility. Okay, so let's just start. I'm going to go back to my guy here, and we're going to add us a spinner. So what the heck is spinner? I mean, is it a widget? Is it a layout? Is it a container? What the heck is this guy? Well, there he is, way, way, way up at the top here. Okay. By the way, just let me rail for a minute. Are these things in alphabetical order? Not really. I mean, they're, right? So, okay, spinner. I'm going to grab a spinner. I'm going to put him right before my my button. Okay. And so I'm going to call this one, let's do colors again. So I'm going to do SP colors. Okay, so one way to populate this way, and a more common technique that we're going to use is we're going to build an array over here in the strings part over here. So I'm going to click on this guy to bring him up. Now, so this is what we got so far, and I need to add to this a strings array. Now this sounds a little weird, so just bear with me. So here we go. So somewhere inside this guy, I need to create me a guy, and I'm going to say string array. Whoa. By the way, this thing does a pretty good job of getting it so you don't have to type. So what is the name of this thing? I don't know. How about colors? Oh, by the way, does that have to be lowercase? Yes. Everything in here has to be lowercase. Okay, cool. And so then I want to close this guy off. All right, and then I put in the actual items that I want. I want an item, and we're going to call it red. Okay, and then we'll do an item for blue, and then we'll do another item. An item for green. Okay, so now I've got this thing. Kind of cool, right? All right, I'm going to close this guy down. And so where the heck does that fit in things in my guy? So if I just kind of scroll through this guy, where can I find out where this guy goes? Well, it's not immediately clear, but the thing in here is called entries. Entries. And I'm gonna use this little guy because this is the resource picker, and it knows all of my array types, and there's the one I want called colors. And so it's going to fill it all in for me. So I'm just going to run this to see what it looks like. And so it already knows that my choices are red, blue, and green. Isn't that pretty cool? All right. I think that part is pretty straightforward. What is not straightforward is how you would go about reading from this thing in the immediate model. Now, if all I wanted to do was to do the deferred model, I want to just check, that part is easy, I think. For the most part, all you basically have to do is just go in there and ask it, hey, which one of these guys is selected? So it's not that complicated. I could go in and say, let's just do that on our guy to show how this part works. So I'm going to have to go back to here and put in a switch. I mean a spinner. A spinner, and I called him SP colors. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to here and just spit out what has currently been selected, if anything. So here I just basically say ET display, set text. Actually, I don't want to. How about append? Since we already got some stuff there. Okay, so basically what I need to know is I need to know SP colors. I need to be able to say get the selected item, and then show me what that item is. Okay, cool. Let's try that. So I'm going to hit the button, and whoa, I must have missed something. Oh, I didn't inflate the guy. Okay, I'll do that, and we'll come back after the commercial break.